Many ask, where did the idea of voodooism in the Caribbean come from? First of all, let's define the word voodoo. The word voodoo comes from the African Fon, who are related to the Yu language. Vu is said to mean self-examination or introspection, and do is said to mean unknown. Voodoo is also said to mean spirit. It is also called Vodou in Haiti, Camdambal in Brazil, Luciemni in Cuba and Obia in Jamaica. They even have it in Trinidad, Tobago, and Grenada, under the name Shango Baptist, and the priests are called Obia, and only blacks can join, no other race. They are from Black and West Indian English, of West African origin, Efik, from the Arab for Africa, Ifriqiya, simply Faraka, to divide or separate, also said Ubio, meaning anything noxious, something put in the ground to cause sickness or death, bad omen. Voodoo is a form of religious belief of African origin, practiced in some parts of the West Indies, Jamaica, and nearby tropical America, involving sorcery according to Europeans. It is known as voodoo in Haiti, Macumba or Candomblé in Brazil, Shango in Trinidad, Santeria in Cuba, and Kumana or Pokemania in Jamaica. A study of sorcery brings use of supernatural power over others through the assistance of spirits. Witchcraft, from the Middle English sorcery, from Old French sorcier, sorcerer from Vulgar Latin sortiarius, a caster of stones from sortiri, from surs, generally sortis, meaning lots, casting of lots. It is clear that the word sorcery has nothing to do with the African religion of Yuroba, for Europeans use stones in runes and the Bible refers to the stone casting of the high priest of Israel, as the Urim and the Thummim, Exodus 28:30. This is the tarot card so widely used by Europeans today. So this ancient practice from Africa, stems from ancestral acknowledgement. This is the same as Christians conjuring spirits in the church under the title Holy Ghost. They seek apparitions, images of Mary, which they refer to as the Blessed Mother Mary, or the praying to saints for help. Muslims also have the same practices at shrines, and khutbahs, where they give prayers to saints and noble men, the Khalifa, and even in Medina during the pilgrimage. Muslims go to the tomb of Muhammad and give praise and prayer to him. So ancestral worship would be as simple as visiting a dead relative at a graveyard and praying or putting down flowers, or remembering them on their birthday or on certain holidays. This is very widely practiced amongst the Orientals in Buddhism and the Indians in Hinduism. So ancestral worship or acknowledgement is common in all religions and cultures. Witches or Wicca are the same, and in most cases give praise to Isis as the Queen Mother. There are good and bad witches, there are good and bad Obia, there are good and bad priests, ministers, imams, and rabbis. So it's a misconception and downright attempt to mislead any who link themselves to a spiritual school, custom or practice that acknowledges respect for the past, or those who went on to another life, or simply the dead. This would be found in respect of Elijah Muhammad or Master Far Muhammad in the Nation of Islam, respect of Noble Drew Ali, or C.M. Bey in the Moorish Science Temple, respect of Malcolm X or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the Christian faith, Clarence, Allah, Smith in the 5%, and acknowledgement of dead presidents, kings, sultans, queens, emperors, and the likes. Through media, voodoo has been given a negative connotation, because as usual, its roots are found in Africa. Whereas the Druids of Europe and the shamans of Russia would be the exact same thing in another language. Voodoo is the calling on ancient ancestors for guidance and power, and is a very widespread practice amongst African tribes. One such tribe is the Yuroba. The Yoruba kingdom was founded in the 8th century about 785 AD. This was a vast empire that included Niger, Nigeria, Benin, Angola, Chad and Sudan. In all the established Yoruba cities, states and towns, these people had a head who was or is called an Oba, which means king. The Yoruba religion is ancestral worship. They have deities for almost everything. Just as the ancient Egyptians, Native Americans, and the likes. Some of the Yoruba deities, or ancestors who went to the other side are by name, Obatala or Orishama, son of Olorun and Yemenja Olokun, who had two other sons, Oduduwa and Orangun. Obatala is the father of Dada, Shango, Ogun, Ochosi, and Shankpanen. Obatala is said to have also been the son of King Olodumare, who was made the supreme god or deity of the Yorubas, and also the owner of the universal energy which exists in all things. He is the god of the north. He is said to be external. His name is meant to be acknowledged as the father of all the Orisha, gods or deities in Yoruba. The special color of Obatala is white. His temples, shrines, object, dishes etc. must always be white. The priests of Obatala wear white clothing, and beards during rituals. All other Orisha must pay homage to him. He is the so-called master of wisdom and creator mentioned in the story of creation. As you can see, the Arabs got Abu or Abba for father and Ta'ala for most high, from the Yoruba. They combined them to get Obatala, the Most High Father. The same is found in Hebrew. Note the similarity between Eber, the founder of Hebrew, and Ebo, one of the Yoruba tribes combined. Oduduwa, the Orisha who created dry land, and was the first ruler of the Ife and all of the Yoruba. He is the son of Yemanja, Olukun and Olorun, brother of Obatala, god of the south. Note again, the word Wadud is used in Arabic and Hebrew for loving and compassion, is even one of their gods, Allah's sacred name, the 47th name, Al-Wadidu. Shango, he is known as the god of the east, war, thunder and lightning, economy, dance and politics. He is the son of Obatala and husband of Oya, Oshun and Oba. His symbol is the double-headed axe and the colors attributed to him are red and white. He was known to be the third Alfin of Oyo or lord of the Oyo palace. Shango was deified after he committed suicide by hanging himself. He is also the national god of Yuroba. Ogun, this is the god of iron and war. He is considered the patron of blacksmiths and all who work with steel or iron. Ogun is now the guardian of sports, policemen, trucks and bus drivers. Ogun is said to be temperamental, and fond of spicy foods and strong drinks. The Yorubas fear the wrath of Ogun. So in the courts, witnesses take a standing oath in the center of a chain dedicated to Ogun. His colors are black and green, or black and white. Yet, he is sometimes represented with the color blue. The symbol of Ogun is said to be a chain with miniature blacksmith's tools attached. Ashosi, the symbol of Ashosi is the bow and arrow. He rules matters of law, the courts and social institutions. Ashosi is said to have lived with Ogun, and he's also the guardian of scouts and hunters. Ischu Elijbura, the mischievous messenger of the Orisha, deities. He is their version of the devil. Yet, the Yorubas worship him because they do not accept a god or deity that is without form, yet perfect. In actuality, to be without form would be a form of imperfection, insofar as form exists. They don't believe in an all-good, all-righteous deity, nor in an extreme evil, but that the universe is balanced of all things. It is said that Ischu brings good luck to those who take extremely good care of him, but it is generally considered that he is the divine trickster, the prankster and the deification, personification, of the unpredictable elements of life. The shrines to Ischu are kept outside of the doors of the house of living arrangements of the persons involved. It is said that he must receive the first portion of any offerings made to the other Orisha. The priests of Ischu wear red and black. They dance in a mischievous, obscene way with a hook or club stick. Note the similarity between the name Ischu and the Greek name Isus for Jesus, and Isa by the Muslims and even Yeshua in Hebrew. In their churches, when they become possessed and speak in tongues, they dance, roll on the ground, foam at mouth, and their clot lies come up. The same thing happens in Islam amongst the Sufis, and this is Christianity and Islam. The deity Ischu or Legba serves as a messenger between gods and mortals. They are indispensable, but nasty. Again you can see that they were borrowed and put into monotheism. Oshun, the Yoruba goddess of river, food, beauty, love, sex, art and culture. The Oshun River is sacred to her, wife of Shango. Her special emblem is a fan, and her colors are amber, yellow and gold. Her specific metal is brass. Oya, known in life as the wife of Shango. When the news of her husband's death reached her, like him, she committed suicide and went after him. Oya is the goddess of the violent winds and storms, which precede the thunder and lightning of Shango of the river Niger. She is also the goddess of fertility. The Niger River is sacred to her, and she has been closely allied with the goddess of cemetery and death, Yansa, and the god, deity, of the whirlwinds, Asia. Yemanja Oiokin is considered the mother of the Orisha. She is called the goddess of the primordial water. She is the wife of Olorun and mother of Obatala and Oduduwa. In accordance to the legend, she had a son named Orangun. Her son was vicious and made attempts to rape her. Yemanja fled from her son until she collapsed in exhaustion. And from her breasts flowed two lagoons, which became the Ogun and Niger rivers. A number of gods came from the midst of her stomach. Supposedly, they are Ogun, Oya Oshun Ashos, Shango, Ikshu and Oko, just to name a few. Make note that in Hebrew, the word Yem means sea. Now look from which it came Yemanja. Olorun, husband of Yemanja Olokun, father of Obatala and Oduduwa, supreme god. These supreme beings or deities are the ancestors of the Yoruba. The original Yorubas lived in Nubia and Egypt. Via the spread of the Yoruba religion, the Yorubas encountered the Arabs of Arabia who were by this time mixed in with the Ottoman, Turks and Russians. Many of them converted to Islam and became known as Hausa of Nigeria, combining the Islamic faith and the Yoruba traditions. This is why to this day, the secret societies of the Islamic world have the powers to walk on hot coal, levitate and many other destructive things to their bodies without any pain or harm. They sit in the streets in the Islamic markets, cast bones and stones and do readings. They read tea leaves and even the remains of coffee in the Turkish coffee cups. All of this with the hands of Fatima having mystical powers, talismans, parchments, omens and jinns. The evil eye is found in the Islamic religion, on the fringes of it, in every Islamic country, superstitions and the likes, and in Christianity even today in America. 7 years bad luck if you break a mirror, or if you walk under a ladder. If you spill salt, you have to throw a pinch over your left shoulder. If someone sweeps your feet, if a black cat crosses your path, or Friday the 13th are all bad luck. Or any office being on the 13th floor is bad luck. They actually have whole office buildings without the 13th floor, and these are Christian superstitions. This is where the evil omens of Islam come from, such as, children can't go to sleep in total darkness, don't sleep with your clothes or shoes next to your bed area, if you sleep with your mouth open the jinn will urinate in your mouth, if you sleep on your stomach the jinn will ride your back, lay shoes sole to sole or the jinns will wear your shoes, cover your pots, or the jinns will eat it at night, and many, many more superstitions in the Islamic religions. Most Americans are never exposed to the entire religion. They are just given the basics of Islam and sincerely believe they are Muslims. You wouldn't need talismans unless you believe in evil spirits. All of these superstitions come from the influence of the Yoruba culture of Africa, our culture. After all that, the Yorubas taught the Arabs, and these Arabs later exiled and enslaved some of them, massacred and murdered them. Back in the 5th century, Mecca was the World Trade Center. The Yorubas and the others, who were considered polytheists, were permitted to practice their religion, being the Meccans of that time, called Sabaeans and Nabateans. They were also worshippers of the stone deities, or moon god, Allah, his wife and family of daughters. 360 gods were in the Kaaba, a temple built to the deity Al-Uzza, who was actually the supreme being Aset Isis of ancient Egypt. All of the rituals found in the Islamic religion are found before it in Judaism and Christianity, which took it directly from Egyptian rituals. Most Muslims do not know this fact and think that their prayer and casting of stones are from the original Allah. This was before the time of Muhammad, around the 5th century. Yuroba was introduced to Mecca by a man called Yaa-Nun. It was not known as Yoruba at that time, just as idolatry or polytheism. The offspring of Yaa-Nun were Oduduwa, the king of Gogobiri and Kokawa, which are tribes in the Hausa country. The Hausa were the Yoruba Muslims. They spoke the Yoruba language and they were Muslims who kept their Yoruba customs and combined the two to breed their own branch of Islam, as well as their own dialect using an Arabic-type script that is called Hausa today. Oduduwa was heir to the throne of Mecca. He went back to the religion of his forefathers during the reign of his father, and both of them together were determined to bring their people back to the worship of their ancestors. One night, the priest of Lamuradu, Asara, put idols in the Kaaba, which at the time was attributed to one deity, Al-Haadi, who is the female crescent deity, symbol of Isis. However, Asara's son was a monotheist and unable to withstand the thought of idols residing in the Kaaba, so he destroyed them. This brought about a civil war between the polytheists and the monotheists. The monotheists were victorious. King Lamuradu was killed and his children were expelled from the city of Mecca. Oduduwa ventured northwest from Arabia back to Sudan. You will find in Sudan, to this very day, Yoruba practices and customs and traditions under different names. One of the deities of Sudan is Anima, Dongan of Sudan. He was the father of Urugu, who was the god of saviors and father of the twins called Nomo. Alma was also a supreme god, god of fertility and god of rain. The twins called Namos was one daughter and one son of Urugu. The Namos sailed down the rainbow in an ark carrying all living creatures. Another deity of Sudan is Nkola, who was the brother of Terra and the god of life. He bestowed life on human beings by breathing life into them. Other deities of Sudan were Nuba, Nzenzo, Sod and Wandasu. Nzenzo and Sod were also gods of fertility like Amma. Nuba was the god of the sky. Nzenzo was known as the god of rain, god of medicine, god of metalworking, and god of corn. Sod was the god of canoe builders and god of smiths. Wandasu was the supreme god. Before long, they were once again confronted with monotheism and Sudan became uncomfortable to them, so Yorubas traveled until they reached Ife, Nigeria. When they first reached there, Oduduwa became king of Yoruba. Ife is where the first of their many independent kingdoms were established by the 12th century. During the 1600s, the northernmost kingdom, Oyo, established a rule over the other Yoruba kingdoms that lasted through the 19th century. Ife, which is considered the first and sacred house of the Yorubas, is a word which means house. The 7 grandchildren of Oduduwa became the kings and queens of the 7 original Yoruba states. The Yoruba Empire stretched from eastern Nigeria, crossing Dahomey and Togo land, as far as Accra in what is now Ghana. In the 1400s, Sudan had become invaded by European tribes of Portuguese, who had established ties with certain tribes in parts of Sudan. They would bring them spices and things that caught their eyes, in return for their so-called friendship. They even brought some of these Sudanese to the point where they sold their own brothers. Most of the ones that were sold were the Muslims and the Yoruba tribes, who were mounted on these European ships and taken to a place that was not their own. And so the African kidnapping business was in effect, what is called slavery. The first of those to be kidnapped were taken to Portugal in 1441 AD, by the Portuguese European Prince Henry the Navigator, the kidnapper, who sponsored many of the African exploration programs, whereupon many Europeans started colonizing and settling on the island off the coast of Africa. These Europeans scanned the African coast in search of souls to kidnap, and in their siege, thousands of Nubian Moors were taken captive. By the 1600s, there was the European and the desert Arab kidnapping in progress, and those kidnapped, the kidnappers had violated an international crime. And those that purchase the kidnapped are an accessory to this international crime. They want you to use the word slave and slave trade so that their emancipation and proclamations will appear to liberate them from the international crime of kidnapping and accessory to kidnapping, of which all who participated are guilty. Not to mention, the abuse of the kidnappings, the rapes, the murders, the castrations, the hangings and the taking away of one's human rights, are all against laws that are referred to as Resolution 3946 adopted by the General Assembly of United Nations, December 10, 1984 AD, which states, recalling the Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from being subjected to torture and other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. Adopted by the General Assembly in its Resolution 3454 of December 9, 1975. This enactment came into existence upon the agreements of 3/4 of the nations of the world. These kidnappings, falsely called slave trades in the 1600s, started with the Englishman John Hawkins in the year 1564 AD, and 1567 AD, the Europeans took their Yorubas to the West Indies, South America and the southern states in North America. The states of North and South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Virginia, etc. By the 1700s there was a Moroccan kidnapping of the dark-skinned woolly-haired Moors, who were sold and called slaves, making the purchases accessory after the fact to kidnapping, which is under UCR Model Penal Code 212.1, called the Lindbergh Act of 1932 AD, where it states, at common law, the forcible abduction or stealing and carrying away of a person from own country to another. The unlawful seizure and removal of a person from own country or state against his will. In American law, the intent to send the victim out of the country does not constitute a necessary part of the offense. These Moors were learned and educated nobles. According to the Focus article, of 1995 August edition, it states, as demand for slaves grew, well-educated African nobles began to be loaded onto the slave boats, as well as the usual rabble of prisoners and poisoners. There were men schooled in military discipline, medicine and the occult and physical sciences. From this new breed of slave were to come many of the rebellion leader, secret society heads and voodoo theologians. So the slave owners had to contend with different types of slaves. As these persons were kidnapped from Africa. Along with them, they brought the Yoruba culture. The culture survived as well as the communications between the different tribes through the use of the drum. In the different parts of the Caribbean and in the Latin islands of Puerto Rico, the Nubian Moors, not to be mistaken with the albino Moors, were forbidden to kidnap, according to the Spanish Act of 1543 AD, which states, in 1543 AD, the Spanish crown ordered that mulattoes could not be taken as slaves to the Americas under the general license for the esclavos negros. In virtue of our general licenses to pass Negro slaves to the Indies, they will be taken, and pass some mulattoes, and others, that are not Negroes, the ones that continue inconvenient, don't let pass any slave, that is not black, even though he be mulatto, without our special license. When the European realized what was taking place, he banned the playing of all drums and things were left up to the word of mouth. From the word of mouth, this culture took on the names Lucimi and today Santeria. The name Lucimi was known in Cuba, but had undergone a change due to the fact that the people were deeply influenced by the Catholic Christian, Spanish-speaking masters and their saints. It had so much influence, that before long, they began identifying their Yoruba deities with the saints of the Catholic Christian religion. This is how Santeria started. The word Santeria is derived from the Spanish word meaning saint. The equivalent deities are, Yoruba, Babaluai, Santeria, San Lazaro, Female, Clyango, Shango, Santa Barbara, Eligua, Angel Guardian, Inland, San Isidro, Obatala, Las Mercedes, Ochosi, Sail Orbertu, Ochun, Caridad del Cabre, Ogun, Sail Pedro, Arunla, Santa Francis de Asira, and Oya in Santeria is called Las Candelaria. The islandicized monotheistic slaves were easier to convert to Christianity because of their one god worship. These Yorubas, that practiced ancestral worship, were not permitted to practice any kind of African religion, because the Europeans considered it outright Satanism. In certain states, they were only allowed to play their drums once a week, and in Louisiana they were only permitted to play their drums in an area far away from the slave master's home. They introduced them to Christianity in hopes of controlling them and erasing their identity. However, as mentioned previously, the Yorubas only incorporated or added Christianity into their culture. The slave owners couldn't control the Yorubas, they were afraid of them, because they would beat their drums by way of the bembe, called the talking drum, in which they would communicate and call on their ancestors. And the slave owners would end up dead. So these Yoruba slaves would be sent out in the field, and the Islamicized monotheistic slaves were used against them. They would still play the drum, and the Islamicized monotheistic slaves would be told to control their Negroes. This is in the root story. However, these slaves would work together to free each other. They would beat up, whip and whelp up the slave that they were freeing and then give them a serum that was created by the shamans and medicine men amongst the slaves. This serum gives all the effects of death. A form of this serum is called zombie powder, which according to Inside a Modern Spirit Religion Voodoo, an article in the 1995 AD, August edition of Focus, this serum contains 1 human skull and assorted bones, vegetable oil, 2 blue agamot lizards, 1 big toad called Crapo bonga, Fufo marinus, 1 sea snake, polychaete worm, an albizia, several pods of itching pea, pois gratter, 2, preferably female, puffer fish of which one must be the sea toad, Crapaud de mer, Spheroaeroid testudineus, add tarantulas, millipedes and wit tree frogs to taste. And the method to this was, the potion or coup poudre should be prepared in June, when the female puffer fish contains greatest quantities of tetrodotoxin. Be careful not to touch the mixture at any time as it can act through skin. Tie the snake to the toad's leg, put them in a jar and bury it. This is so the toad dies of rage, which increases the concentration of its poison. Place the skull in a fire with the thunderstone and some blessed oil and burn till black. Roast the anima. Ingredients and grind with the uncooked plants in a pestle and mortar. Add unheated shavings of the human bone. Now grind your mixture to a fine powder, place in a jar and bury, in the coffin with the rest of your source skeleton if possible for 3 days. You now have your coup poudre, which is traditionally sprinkled in a cross on the threshold of the target. A more certain method is to sprinkle it down the back or in the shoe. The victim will collapse, apparently dead. This formula was taken from the 1995 AD, August edition of Focus. I don't suggest that you experiment with this, for it could be lethal. The house slaves would then show the slave masters that the slaves were dead. The slave master would not bother to bury the slaves, he would leave that to the slaves to take care of. However, the slave masters would come out to the funeral. The slaves would bury the dead slave in a shallow grave face down, with a hole dug to create an air pocket, to give them breathing space for a few hours. Oftentimes they would put hollow twigs at the headstone in the form of a cross, so that they can breathe, giving the appearance of a heap of dirt with a cross made from bamboo, which can be hollowed out. This apparent death, examination, which would result in the appearance of no pulse because the drug reduces the pulse circulation, gave the slave master the impression that the slaves had a fight amongst themselves, one was killed, buried and it was over. Later that night, the slaves would dig up the grave and free the dead slaves, telling them to run and go amongst the Native Americans, until they make it into another state. These runaway slaves were called Maroons. The purpose was for them to become free, reclaim their nationality or Moorish identity, then arranged by purchasing or by smuggling other slaves into freedom. They lived amongst the various tribes of Native Americans and married, being they were indistinguishable. So your Moors and your Yoruba mixed in with your Native Americans. The first African slaves fled to the natives and that was only a beginning. Individuals or groups fled to the Native Americans in the Carolinas, or the De Soto expedition on the Coronado expedition to Kansas, Peru, in Mexico and especially along the coast of Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Nicaragua and Guatemala. Taken from the Black Africans and Native Americans by Jack D. Forbes. Other slaves ran into the bayous of the swamps and became known as the Gitches. When the dead slaves were seen in other towns and reported to the slave owner as alive, the slave owner would not believe the report because they saw that slave buried and dead. He would check the grave site, which would be empty. This would frighten the slave master. Thus, began the many zombie and living dead stories. The word zombie means, a corpse revived in this way, one who looks or behaves like an automaton. From the Caribbean French and English Creole, from Kimbundu and Zumbi, ghost, departed spirit. Needless to say, when it was confirmed that slaves whom the master saw beaten to death and witnessed with his own eyes their burial, were seen in other towns alive and healthy, this frightened or spooked him, giving rise to the slur. According to the article in Focus of August 1995 AD, their first move toward overthrowing the white slave owners was a highly effective campaign of poisoning begun in the mid-18th century. So well organized was the poisoner network that barrels of ale straight off ships from Europe were already rendered deadly. As the tide turned in favor of the rebels, the revolution proper was launched in 1791 with a voodoo ritual involving the sacrifice of a black pig, symbol of Africa. Because they couldn't control these slaves, they were sent to the Caribbean island, and into Cuba and Haiti. The slaves from the Caribbean islands had this warrior mentality because they met up with the slaves from the Zulu tribe of Africa who remembered killing and exiling all the whites from their villages. This is why the history of the slaves in the Caribbean island states that they revolted and continuously fought against the slave owners. Example, according to Multimedia Grolier Encyclopedia, inspired by the French Revolution, 1789, the slaves in the colony, under the leadership of François Toussaint Louverture, rebelled, 1791, and gained control of the colony but did not declare independence. In 1802, Napoleon I sent a French army under General Charles Leclerc to subdue the Haitians. Leclerc captured Touchant, but the Haitian force under Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christopher defeated the French. The whole island was declared independent on January 1, 1804 and given the name of Haiti. So, as it is plain to see, with a little research revealed, that voodoo, also called Yuroba, or Santeria, was nothing more than traditional ancestral acknowledgement amongst our people. It was an attempt to keep alive our customs and practices that went back thousands of years before we had any contact with the European, whom himself and herself borrowed from and created various cults, sects, covens, fraternities, societies, and churches. If you are interested in seeing a traditional Yoruba village in America today, one can be found in Sheldon, South Carolina. The village is called Oyachinji, and the king, priest of the village is named Oba Surgaman. You will also find that if you go into different Caribbean islands or into villages of Africa, they have what they call a witch doctor, which is a term that the Europeans gave to these medicine men of the villages, to put in your mind that they were demon worshippers or sorcerers, when this is not the case.